They say that every good story needs a good villain, and the medium of video games is no different. But while some video game wronguns have gone on to become recognizable cultural icons, others have inevitably become sadly lost in the fray over the years, despite being just as deserving of our attention. For this list, we're taking a look at some of the video game baddies that deserve far more love than they actually get. Obviously, what qualifies as an underrated villain will vary depending on who you ask, but we've tried to cover a diverse selection of choices you wouldn't usually see on lists like this. Also, we've tried to keep spoilers to a minimum, but it can be a tad difficult to avoid them completely in a list where we're talking about characters and their motivations, so be warned. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most underrated video game villains. Number 10. Walton Simons, Deus Ex. The influence of Deus Ex on gaming, the immersive sim, and cyberpunk culture cannot be denied. The game is still widely celebrated, but we can't help but feel that the game's antagonist-in-chief, Walton Simons, doesn't get the credit he deserves, as people are too busy applauding the game's other achievements. The future setting of Deus Ex is a world where every conspiracy theory you've ever heard and more is basically true. Walton Simons, director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is privy to a lot of sensitive info which he will go to any lengths to protect. With his icy demeanor, ruthless tactics, and plethora of cybernetic enhancements, Simons is a dark reflection of the game's protagonist, J.C. Denton, who could have easily gone down Simons' dark path had he chosen to totally abandon his morals. Simons' memorable one-liners, delivered in iconic fashion by id Software's in-house designer Tom Hall, make it so that you can't help but admire the guy, even when he is mercilessly executing rebel freedom fighters for no reason other than to cover his own back. However, he can be outsmarted by putting a plant pot in front of the door he's trying to get through, so he's not always that intimidating. Number 9. Darth Nihilus, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. When it comes to the Star Wars universe, there are a lot of famous Darths out there. In fact, we'd wager it's probably the most common first name among villains in any medium. However, the galaxy far, far away's resident edgy goth boy, with perhaps the only voice in the entire series that could go toe-to-toe with Vader on the scary yet cool front, always seems to get overlooked. Once an ordinary man, Knights of the Old Republic 2's Darth Nihilus fell to the dark side when he lost everything in the Jedi's war with the Mandalorians. Unable to deal with his trauma, the dark side consumed Nihilus until it became his life's purpose to make sure it consumes everything else in the galaxy too. I mean, some of us go to therapy, but, whatever helps. With his black metal-inspired mask, excellently designed flagship reflecting his own unstable personality, and all-consuming desire to spread death and darkness across the galaxy, Nihilus is still a divisive villain among fans. Maybe it's because this hyped-up destroyer of worlds is ultimately quite easily defeated at the game's end. However, this highlights what makes Nihilus special. Deep down, he's just an ordinary man. Star Wars is at its best when exploring the grey between the dark and the light, and Nihilus, along with the game's other villains, gives players more nuance than they might be used to seeing in the franchise. Number 8. Adrian Ripburger, Full Throttle. One of Mark Hamill's lesser-known villain roles, Adrian Ripburger is the main antagonist of Full Throttle, a point-and-click adventure from Tim Schafer, the man behind Psychonauts, Grim Fandango, and Brutal Legend. As the CEO of a high-tech motor company in a dystopian future, Adrian begins the game patiently waiting for his business partner, Malcolm Corley, to die so he can fully take over the company. However, when the pair's limo has a chance encounter with an old-school biker gang and its grizzled leader Ben, no relation, the fate of the two groups becomes intertwined and makes Ripburger's plan of a simple, non-violent takeover a little more complicated. Powerful, corrupt, and violent, Ripburger bullies and intimidates anyone standing in his way, including Ben, no relation, who has done nothing but stand his ground against a man who has tried to exploit him and his polecats biker gang for money. When Ripburger plays his hand with cash, influence, and loyal thugs willing to do his dirty work, it makes his efforts of evil all the more detestable. With both brains and brawn, Ripburger is closer in personality to Bane than the Joker, which tells us that Mark Hamill could have played the entire roster of Batman villains if he'd wanted to. Number 7. Tony Redwood, Policenauts. Previously unavailable in the West, but now playable due to fan efforts, Hideo Kojima's Policenauts might be better known today if it wasn't overshadowed by his later, more solid output. As a member of Future Society's advanced police force, Tony Redwood was literally manufactured to be better at police work than mere humans in every way, and takes every opportunity to lord it over the player whenever they swing by to report in. This would be great if he was on your side, but alas, he is secretly working for the baddies and openly delights in the fact that he and you both know it and you can do nothing about it. Policenauts follows the typical point-and-click adventure format, so Redwood is usually found in the same location each time just to casually inform you that your star witness has recently had an unfortunate accident, or your smoking gun evidence just happened to fall down the toilet when you needed it most. Being far from the only long-haired weirdo on this list, Mr. Redwood is a great example of a villain who manages to always stay one step ahead of the player even without apparently going anywhere. Number 6. Walter Sullivan, Silent Hill 4: The Room. "Don't go out, Walter," is the warning Silent Hill 4's hapless protagonist Henry Sullivan sees when he wakes up one day to find himself locked in his rented apartment with no way out. This Walter is a troubled orphan who once lived in the same apartment and considers it to be his mother, literally and figuratively, and will resort to anything to evict Henry from his rightful home, including murder. Incidentally, Walter is also the one who left the message, but that doesn't mean it can't still be taken two ways. Walter is not a hench, sword-wielding, pyramid-head monster or a fanatical child-murdering cult leader. In fact, he's more like an awkward peeping Tom who looks like a long-haired Brendan Fraser, so it's easy to initially dismiss him. However, as Sullivan's arch plan becomes clearer, players will find themselves increasingly helpless in Walter's twisted game. As something of the black sheep in the original quadrilogy, Silent Hill 4: The Room is not set in Silent Hill, and Henry is not a tormented soul, but a normal guy who happens to live in a flat formerly owned by a maniac. This believable prospect is what makes Walter's villainous plan even scarier. Think about it. Who was the previous tenant in your residence? Better keep those doors locked tight if you don't want to find out. Although, it sounds like they might already be inside. Look behind you! Ah! Number 5. Magus, Chrono Trigger. Everyone loves a bad guy, but what we really love is a good bad guy, right? Initially, Lord Magus, the dramatic poetry-spouting dark mage at war with the Kingdom of Guardia in Chrono Trigger, doesn't especially seem to fit the bill for a character we could see ourselves having a drink with. After all, Magus causes no end of grief for Chrono and his party in the first half of the game, being responsible for turning one of them into an anthropomorphic frog, and he's even guarded by rock legends Slash Flea and Ozzy, so of course he's a corrupting influence on our youth, right? However, Chrono Trigger's unique time travel element allows players to see the origin of this baddie and thus get an understanding of where he's coming from. Throughout the course of the game's epic story, players will soon discover Magus's true motivations, that they have a common enemy, and that they can even coerce him into joining their party. Maybe it's this redeemable quality that makes people forget that he's a villain, but this would be like not recognizing Darth Vader, Zuko, or the Timekeeper as villains, wouldn't it? What do you mean no one knows who the Timekeeper is? He's a villain turned anti-hero from the classic Spy Kids 4. Everyone remembers him, surely, right? Anyone? No? Number 4. Galleon, Luna series. On the flip side of the JRPG spectrum, you have Galleon from the Luna series. Originally one of the 4 heroes who shaped the magical setting of Vane, the main characters of Luna Silver Star's story initially look up to Galleon for his past efforts and form a friendship with the heroic Dragon Master. Galleon even briefly joins the player's party, showing himself to be an unstoppable powerhouse in both magic and strength. Thank goodness he's on our side, right? However, it's at this point that Galleon's festering resentment and jealousy of Vane's ruling powers reveal itself. In fact, he's only been pretending to be your friend so you could lead him to the location of the White Dragon, whose power he needs to rule the world. Come on, man, I thought we were friends. With his arrogant attitude, dry wit, and penchant for repeatedly referring to the main character as Dragon Boy, players will spend the whole game waiting to put this smug jerk in his place, even though they've already had a taste of just how difficult that's going to be. Magus might be a complicated bad guy who eventually turns good, but Galleon is just a straight-up knob, and sometimes that's what a good story needs. Number 3. Calypso, Twisted Metal series. As an ex-demolition driver with the #most tragic backstory ever, Calypso is the creator of the Twisted Metal contest, a carnival of chaos which he is permitted to run on the condition that the winner is granted any wish he or she desires. Given Calypso's misanthropic nature, however, he tends to make these wishes backfire on the winners in cruel and ironic ways. Throughout his multiple incarnations, Calypso's prizes are a constant staple of the Twisted Metal series and are highly anticipated by players. Before these endings got a bit weird and, well, rubbish thanks to the CGI enhancements of the later games, they were full of all the edgy early 90s pulp glory you could wish for, specifically in the lovingly rendered comic art style of Twisted Metal 2, which was later brought back for Twisted Metal Head On. Our personal favourite is the ending dealt to Spectre, an actor who wants his face to be seen by the world. Obviously, Calypso's most natural recourse is to rip off poor Spectre's face and stretch it across the earth until it blots out the sun, making sure it is indeed seen by everyone. Unconventional, Calypso, but admirable, maybe. Number 2. Errol, Jak 2. We featured Jak and Daxter's Gol and Maya on our 101 most iconic video game villains of all time list, but arguably the real villain of the entire Jak and Daxter series is Errol, the henchman to the evil Baron Praxis. After Jak crash lands in Haven City at the beginning of Jak 2, Errol is one of the first characters that players encounter, and he isn't friendly. Taking an instant dislike to Jak, Errol makes it his life's mission to not only betray Jak to the city's ruthless Baron, but also to outdo Jak in every competitive area possible. From competing against him in the Zuma Championship to trying to woo Jak's estranged girlfriend Kira, Errol's one-sided rivalry and sheer determination slowly raises him from secondary villain to primary antagonist by the start of the third game. As one of the only villains in the Jak and Daxter franchise to appear across multiple games, Errol's continued presence in the series starts to become like that old secondary school bully who still hits you up on Facebook 20 years later to brag about how successful he's become. "Ooh, I'm a mechanical dark eco-infused puppet for the Dark Precursors now. How are you doing, still hanging out with those lowly rebels? Ugh, jog on, mate." Number 1. Malcolm, Legend of Kyrandia series. When it comes to evil clowns in gaming, Kefka and the Joker get most time in the spotlight. However, true OGs know the original clown prince of crime, chaos and conquest is Malcolm, the scheming and totally bonkers villain of Westwood Studios' point-and-click adventure series Legend of Kyrandia. As a court jester and close friend of King William the Generous, Malcolm turned out to be not so generous and decided to assassinate the king on a whim, seizing control of the kingdom until the leader of the Order of Royal Mystics created a magical seal around him. The first Legend of Kyrandia takes place 18 years later when Malcolm breaks free. He's had time to think over his actions, and he's changed his ways. Only joking, he's more vengeful than ever and immediately starts wreaking havoc on Kyrandia, destroying trees, blowing up squirrels, and is ready to dispose of anything standing in his way, including the player. Petty, vengeful, and gleefully sadistic, Malcolm is also a strangely compelling villain. This is not due to any sympathetic or likable trait per se, but more because he's so unhinged and unpredictable that it makes it strangely enjoyable to see what he's going to do next. This, we suppose, is what clowns do best, because, let's face it, they're all evil.